This video contains major spoilers for Metaphor ReFantazio. Metaphor is a game I knew basically nothing about before playing. I knew that it was made by some of the Persona developers, and that was it. I couldn't be happier that I went in blind, because what I found was an incredible experience. One that both further evolves the Persona formula, yet escapes its fundamental roots. I'm Ouroboros. Let's talk. Metaphor starts off kind of ambiguous. The opening cutscene, before you even start the game, I may add, gives us about 1,000 questions and absolutely no answers. We're thrown into a fantasy world in the midst of a regicide. The kingdom is thrown into disarray, there's no heir to the throne, and two clear successors are made apparent. The leader of the state religion, Sanctifex Fortin, and the king's killer, Count Louise Guillerburn. You, however, are on a mission to meet up with another member of the resistance to save the king's son. The prince was put under a curse that put him into a vegetative state. You have two options. Find a counter curse, which only the original caster can provide, or just kill the caster. You, your fairy navigator and comrade Gallica, a disgraced noble Stroll and former tutor to the prince, Grius, come to the conclusion that you must kill Louise. Nobody else could have placed the curse on His Highness. After ambushing Louise, Grius finds himself restrained by the royal magic. The late king declares that the new ruler will be decided not by blood or force, but by the will of the people. The kingdom has effectively turned into a democracy for the next few months. However, the frontrunners for the throne are protected by the royal magic and are unable to be killed. Hence, Grius' restraints. Louise, seeing the danger, kills him. This sparks the Tournament for the Throne, a multi-stage race to stir up support for all the candidates and help decide the new king. You and your party decide to enter, not for the chance to be king, but to get closer to Louise and, eventually, kill him. I know that sounds like a lot for the opening, and it is, but man, we get a lot of time to digest that. Like many JRPGs, it takes its sweet time opening things up and giving you all the backstory and setting and exposition for everything this world has to offer. That's not to say that it's not interesting, though. Like I said, within the first minute of that opening cutscene, we see Louise kill the king. We are also shown what the game is going to be about right off the bat. I mean, the game directly talks to you, the player, and establishes that our world, the real world, is their version of a utopia. And this sets up the themes for the game ahead. You get plenty of time to soak in and relish this new world. Of course, with the help of the new memorandum. There are so many terms that get thrown at you, all the different races, places, all of the magic stuff. It can be overwhelming. The memorandum is enormous and will help clarify basically any question you may have. It's a really great addition. But like I said, this game gives you tons of questions and just lets them sit there for a while. However, one thing is made immediately apparent, and it's that humans are dangerous, like existential threat dangerous. This is kind of the first reveal of the game, if you want to call it that. Humans are these grotesque abominations. They're not like other enemies in the game. Most other monsters have real-world influences. Like, oh, this is a snake monster, and that's a gargoyle, and this is some kind of bird or insect monster. But humans are unlike anything else. They truly stand out for their otherworldly designs. A lot of the human designs are taken directly from the Dutch painter Hieronymus Bosch. Many of the demons in his painting, The Garden of Earthly Delights, are one-to-one with the humans in Metaphor. Of course, that leads to the first awakening in the game. After climbing the fort, you and Stroll encounter your first human boss. Overcome with the desire to protect him, you rip out your metal heart and awaken to the Seeker archetype. And that's when I realized that this game is really like Persona. Like I said, I knew basically nothing about this game going in, so this was a great moment for me. And the two of you make it out alive. This, the incident in the mines, and many, many other instances in this game make you realize that there's so much more going on than what's being presented. It's always in the back of your head that you don't have the full picture. Unfortunately, one thing I was very sure of in the mines is that Grius was gonna die. He doesn't get an awakening, he's not a follower, you go to see his daughter, Maria, right after you get back. He says things like, "Oh, honey, don't worry, I'll be back soon and then everything will be okay." Look, I've played enough games to know how these things work, and wouldn't you know it, he dies. There's also this eerie lack of music playing when you're in Sunshade Road before the funeral. There's only the church bells in the background, and this was another sign that something terrible was going to happen. Luckily for us, the players, this is really where the game opens up. You finally gain access to most of the game mechanics that the game will give you, and we also start to see our first real dungeon, the Grand Cathedral. The journey up is really fun. I enjoyed talking to all the civilians on the way up, and the final run up all those stairs is super satisfying. You get to see the skybound avatar above you, as well as the city and the human at the base, which is really good foreshadowing after the boss fight with Zorba as it gets reanimated. After it's defeated, you're given your overarching goal for the game. Kill Louise and maybe become king in the process. I loved that there was a strongly defined goal in this game. So often in games, especially these big, massive JRPGs, the goalposts get moved over and over again, but here we know exactly what we need to do. Entering the tournament is essentially a front for our group to get closer to Louise. Becoming king might happen, but that's really a secondary goal. That also puts so much focus on Louise as the main antagonist of this game. Again, there are so many times when the villain in a story changes. You go from battling your local bully to killing God. Kind of expected that to happen here, but I'll get into that more a little later on in this video. Our journey from Grand Trad to Martyra introduces us to something new in this game, the traveling sections on the Gauntlet Runner. These are a nice in-between throughout the game. They're a nice break from the usual formula of level up followers and clear the dungeon where it's just you and your party. I particularly adore the special areas that you travel to along the main journey. They're really nice times to stop and just admire the scenery. They don't really serve any purpose other than to oogle at the landscape, but it's small things like that that add a lot to the setting. Of course, these sections also offer a great time to level up your royal virtues, and there are even some follower ranks that can only be completed while you're in the Gauntlet Runner. You do have your first real encounter with Louise here, but the star of the show is Neurus. When you think he's gonna go crazy over Juna, he's actually going crazy over the Gauntlet Runner behind her. There are tons of comedic moments in this game, and they add so much character to, well, the characters. So you get to Martyra and do your due diligence, and oh, you get swallowed by a sandworm. Lovely. And there's a dude just chilling in there? Look, I'm not gonna judge, but what do you eat? I don't want to know. Also, the objective here is basically get to the anus, so moving on. I know I said there are a lot of comedic moments, but I just love when the group is trying to lure out Haisme. It's so goofy, it's such a stupid idea to get him to appear, and it works perfectly. This group just oozes with so much personality, and they have such a great group dynamic. I was cackling way more than I probably should have at this point, but that's besides the point. I did feel really dumb during the Haisme battle because I couldn't actually figure out which ones were the clones and which one was him. I had to look it up.
Years of academy training wasted!
And oh look, more racism. Yeah, the game isn't exactly subtle about hiding this idea. I mean, we saw it as soon as we arrived in Grand Trad. There have been plenty of people who are rude towards you for being an Elda, but Haisme just furthers the idea of a rigid societal hierarchy because it's not just the Elda at the bottom and everyone else at the top. there are definitive tiers to this system. I do think that Haizume's awakening is a bit rushed. Even the party members kind of acknowledge it, saying things like, "Wow, that happened way faster than us." But that's a minor complaint. Lady Joanna is certainly an interesting choice for a villain during this story arc. I guess Morris is kind of one as well, but he pales in comparison to her. She's a grieving mother taken to the absolute extreme. You can definitely tell that there's some conspiracy theory stuff going on in the sewers, but it's not until we get into the baby's room that we really understand what's going on. I would have liked to have seen some sort of flashback to when she first encountered the human. Clearly, she wouldn't have had these feelings if she saw it for the first time like we did. It had to have been small and then quickly grown into what we saw, right? I guess if she were under the heavy effects of melancholia, it could go either way. But the main point is that she was in such a depressive state that she couldn't make a logical judgment. Regardless, the cut to the human behind Morris is absolutely terrifying, and Joanna's voice actress, Tracy Wiles, does an amazing job of conveying her rapid descent into insanity. I do think it's funny that in the midst of all this, Gallica does throw out the line of,
"She healed the demon baby?"
It's just another way that the game makes me laugh. Haizume's speech after the boss battle is really fitting here. It feels like he and Joanna took two different ways to react to their children's death. Haizume shut himself in and lived as a hermit, hoping that death would come for him, whereas Joanna obsessively latched on to the next living thing that came into her life. While her surrogate child is an abomination, there's no doubt these two took different paths to redemption. Haizume was lifted out of misery through will and the archetypes, while Joanna saw death and her only repentance. I think that Joanna's execution is a reasonable one. I know it's played as a bit of a sad moment, which, yeah, there's always going to be some sympathy for a childless mother, but there was no other way out for her. Her breakdown after the fight is a great scene, and I personally love her as a slightly tragic minor villain. I really began to engross myself in this game when I arrived at Brylehaven. I felt like this was the moment when I began to understand the Kingdom of Uchronia the most. There's so much character with each and every settlement. I know that they're not super creative. The game mostly consists of basic and generic fantasy towns, but the people in each city are so charming, and I enjoyed getting to know many of the other candidates in this area. Brylehaven is the first area that we truly get a sense for the race to be king. We got a quick introduction to the handful of other candidates a while back, but nothing like Brylehaven. This is the birth of the democratic political campaign throughout the game. I love that you can go and debate the other candidates. Not only is it fun to test your speech skills against the other characters, but they also get at least a little bit of development, and you get tons of royal virtues from it. However, I really wish that some of the other candidates were followers. I know that Katharina is one, but we met her in Grand Trad well before the race was established. It would have played into the political aspects of the game much more, something that many other games don't explore. If you think about it, this game is basically you running your own medieval fantasy political campaign. I don't think that's something I've ever heard of before, and it's such an intriguing idea. Atlus didn't even have to include every single opposing candidate, but even adding like Lena and Loveless would have gone a long way in furthering this aspect of the game. We do, however, get plenty more development for my favorite character in the game, Louise. At this point, we know we're supposed to hate him, but I didn't really understand why. I mean, he has the support of many people. He runs on the platform of meritocracy, something which I agree with in real life for the most part. The people who are best at the job should get said job. He was also way less racist than basically 90% of the people in the game, so what gives? Why is this guy set up as the villain in this game? Well, we get an idea when we visit him. He basically destroyed Stroll's village to make a point. Unfortunately, his reasoning isn't entirely wrong. He did it to show the greater populace that the humans are an existential threat, because nobody in the capital would have believed it if something like that didn't happen so close to them. So while he's a ruthless leader, at this point, he kind of makes sense. Not saying that it's good, but it at least makes sense. He plays really well into the themes of the game. Throughout all of our time in Brylehaven, Louise steals the spotlight. Right next to him is always Juna. She clearly knows way too much just to be some minor character, and I was basically Will during this scene. I don't know how I would react to having a nationally renowned singer corner me against a wall right after I Tony Hawk Pro skated my way across the wing of an airplane. Did I die a bunch of times because I didn't know how the jumps worked? Yes, I did. Do I care? No, I do not, because it's crazy and unexpected and amazing, and I love this chunk of the game. But not as much as Dragon Grace Shinjuku. Holy shit, I love this reveal so much. I've made a dedicated video to this plot point, so I won't get too deep into it, but I would hate myself if I didn't at least go over it a little bit in this review. At this point in the game, you're pretty engrossed in this fantasy setting and the race for the throne. There was never really a point when I questioned the backstory of this world. Yeah, humans are beastly monstrosities, but I thought that had more to do with the idea that we, real-life humans, are destructive. You know, like a metaphor. But then we get to the Dragon Temple and see the murals. These paintings instantly change the way you view the game. A war of colossal scale destroyed the world. One in which dragons were used as weapons. One which dwarfs the current conflict in Uchronia. One which dwarfs conflicts that we have in the real world. Then you descend into the temple, and you're met with not another basement level, but a modern city. And Yufa speaks the words that will forever stay with me. This is Dragon Grace Shinjuku, the Lost City. People, real life people, are the humans. The utopia that has been in Will's book all this time was not some fiction. It was not some fantasy. It was real life. This moment changes the game. It changes everything that you've been given and completely reframes the entire world. It's a spectacular moment, and if you want to hear more of my thoughts, check out my dedicated video on it. And then that revelation just sits there. The other characters acknowledge it at the time, but then it's back to our regularly scheduled programming. The game asks you to put the pieces together, and doesn't give you an answer for the longest time. During the Virga Island arc, we also get hints that maybe Basilio is going to change sides. He starts to question Louise's future, something we haven't seen from any of his followers before. It's nice to see the characters catch up to our own thoughts. It was around this time that I started to really change my view of Louise. The more I roamed around the labyrinthian maze of the Dragon Temple, the more I thought about how his future would work for people who aren't able to protect themselves, and how his vision is less of a meritocracy and more of a might makes right society. Fidelio and Basilio even confront Juna, but they don't do anything. That in action, to me, shows that Del is pretty conflicted. He has strong convictions, and this is the first time we see him falter. So his inner confusion about this mess tells me that his faith in Louise has been shaken. These two are fantastic characters and serve as the middleman between Will's ideals and Louise's. They kind of act as a surrogate between the player and the game to poke hole in Louise's vision for the country. We also get a fun little date scene with your choice during the festival while our friends are drunk on cactus juice.
It's the gorgeous!
Wait, wrong series. But I had to choose between Gallica and Juna. How am I supposed to do that? I went with Gallica. She's too cute not to. I mean, I really wish there was voice acting here, but I guess I'll survive. Now we arrive at the Opera House. Oh boy, the Opera House. It opens really weird with this bizarre trading sequence at the beginning for some reason, but on with the main show. This is it. This is finally the moment we get to kill Louise. I expected some shenanigans here because the Day of the Hero was still a month away, but I was not prepared for what we got. So this whole sequence feels like it's about 1.5 years long with all the crazy plot moments. The build-up, the quick run up the roof of the building, the Louise fight, the return back to the inn, Louise's resurrection, the Rella fight. Like, seriously, this part is so long. I actually saved after killing Louise. I was up late playing and kinda had to go to bed, so I figured with Louise put to rest, that was a good natural stopping point. And then I went to work the next day, and literally all I could think about was how dumb it was that Louise got killed off at that point. I got home and immediately wrote tons of notes because I wanted to dedicate a massive section in this video as to why that was an awful idea. I booted up the game to see what awaited me, and lo and behold, he was back. Needless to say, this threw me for a loop. Mostly because Zorba seemed like such an inconsequential character at his introduction and apparent demise. I really didn't think we'd see him again. I feel like it would have made much more sense to have him introduced later and then just not kill him off. But the real star is Louise and the fight you have with him during the escape. Even at half health, he's a massive threat and will knock down party members with ease. The fight can snowball pretty quickly, and again, he's at half health. Even if Atlus intended for him to have that much health to begin with, it's fantastic storytelling through just a simple UI change. I also personally love the music that plays during this particular fight. It's funny that I'm getting so wrapped up in this whole section about Louise. I'm gonna gush way more about him later, but he is one of the most fantastic parts in the entire game. Ironically, he completely overshadows Basilio's awakening and Fidelio's death. It does feel a little more subdued than the previous ones because there's no fight to go along with it. It's about him coming to terms with his brother's death and furthering his resolve to fight for your ideals. Plus, there's even a section where your party realizes that Louise wasn't even the person who cast the curse on the prince. There's seriously so much going on during this. It's insanely densely packed with plot and character moments that I feel myself jumping from idea to the next just thinking about it. I remember screaming every 10 minutes while playing through this chunk. Every RPG has a point when shit hits the fan. This is like a herd of woolly mammoths taking a collective deuce on a wind turbine. And I haven't even talked about Rella yet. Oh my god, so much happens here. After Rella consults with her discount Seeley, you do eventually learn that she was in fact the one to put the curse on the prince. Against her will, of course. She tells you that you can't win the throne with strength alone, and to prove that, she fights you. Okay, yeah, it's a test because Louise's vision is one overrun with humans, but I still thought that was a little funny. It does suck that Basilio is like mega doo-doo trash in this fight. I would have liked to have had at least a little bit of a showcase of what he can do, but I understand it's a boss fight. At the end of the day, it has to be challenging, and he's generally pretty good outside of this fight, but we're not done because it's full steam ahead to the Elden Sanctum, where we finally get the confirmation we've all been looking for. The Elda are the descendants of modern-day humans. Louise was born here. You are actually the fantasy of the prince. Magla is caused by anxiety. Basically, all the questions you've been asking over the past 50-ish hours are answered here. And it's so cathartic. It's so relieving to finally talk to somebody who knows what's going on. Metaphor has really only been asking you questions since the game started. It constantly asks more of you. It asks more of you to understand its plot, its themes, its characters, its gameplay. Which, ironically, causes you some anxiety. Its questions feed into your own questions until you end up in a series of circular reasoning or come to your own conclusions. It's at this point that your questions, theories, and speculations are answered. Most of them, at least. There are still a few prevailing issues that the game decides to cover in its final arc. My favorite part about this is that Metaphor finally acknowledges Drakengrace Shinjuku. It was about time. Atlus, you're killing me. You can't drop something like that on me and then expect to wait dozens of hours before I can get some real confirmation. I am upset that I got the fusion between Will and the Prince slightly spoiled. I was looking for pictures of Will to use in the thumbnail of another video, and lo and behold, there was a picture of Will getting crowned. I mean, obviously I knew Will becoming king was a pretty big possibility, but the white hair really gave it away. And at this point, the game feels like it's pretty much over. All you have to do is confront Louise in the Royal Palace. Except the deadline is a month away. It's funny because the game takes place over the course of about 5 months, and then Atlus gives you an entire month for the final dungeon. It makes it very clear, in no uncertain terms, that this is the final battle. A battle in which you need to prepare for. It was nice being able to finish everything in Persona game for once. Bit of an odd feeling for sure, but a welcome one. It's cool to run around and do the optional dungeons and bosses, see Godot at the church in Grand Trad. Wow, character development! And complete all of the followers for once. However, I think this final arc is just a tad too long. If it had been about 10 days shorter, I think it would have been the perfect length. A month is just too long to go without the main story. I also think there's just a little too many "we can finally take down Louise" moments in the game. With this one, it's a little more final. Like, obviously we've known the Day of the Hero has been our big looming deadline for a while now, but it does get repetitive. When you do eventually land on the Tyrant Star, it's a fantastic moment. It does feel like that grand finale we've been looking for. I love that when you defeat Walmart One-Winged Angel, everyone feels like they're fighting for you. It's a different feeling than most other games when your allies are fighting with you. These are your noble servants. They are there to serve you. So to see them so willing to throw down their lives to help you stop Louise is a very powerful moment. Unfortunately, it gets undone really quickly. The game just kind of glosses over it. 1 second they're on their last stand, and then poof, they're back in the party. I know why they did it, but for once I'd love it if a game actually killed off their main characters and not brought them back. I feel like it cheapens their actions and potential sacrifice. But pacing and mortality issues aside, Louise is a great final challenge, and we get a nice epilogue to finish things out. I love saying goodbye to your followers before the final fight, but seeing them 1 year later is confirmation that your actions bore fruit. They still have the same goofy group dynamic as they did before, although now they are in extremely high positions of power. It just sucks that the last story arc takes forever. Metaphor loses a bit of steam towards the end of its narrative. That's partially due to the abnormally long deadline, but I also feel that its inconsistency in its themes are to blame. Compare this to the other Persona games. I can sum up the themes of Persona 3, 4, and 5 in just a few words. 3 is about life and death, 4 is about truth and self-acceptance, and 5 is about freedom and rebellion. What is Metaphor about? Utopia, anxiety, racism, political corruption, power, humanity, empathy, religion, meritocracy. There's just too many things that the game attempts to address, and that muddies the waters too much. Instead of intensively diving into just a few of these topics, it feels like it shifts gears too much. Obviously, Utopia is the main overarching theme of the game, but how Metaphor goes about tackling and highlighting that theme feels too scatterbrained. Most of its explorations feel a little too ankle-deep. Not to mention the fact that a character like Forden seems to be a big focus of its exploration of political corruption and religious influence, and then he just kind of dies. And all of that gets tossed aside without much thought. This isn't something that you'll probably notice when playing the game. I didn't when I first completed it. However, as I've thought more about it, I keep coming back to the conclusion that there's just too much going on. And it's not even a massive criticism that I have of the game, but when I'm diving this deep into every aspect of the game, I have to dedicate some time to this. But enough of the story. What about the gameplay? Well, it's just like a Persona game. I mean, it's not a carbon copy, but if you've played any of the modern Persona games, it's just a fantasy version of that. I didn't know that going into the game. I was happy with the overworld real-time combat. It's a nice way to speed up the pointless fights. You no longer have to go through the usual motions of seeing the battle intro play out, hitting a few weaknesses, seeing the reward screen, and then finally getting back to what you were doing. It's just a few simple hits, and that's all you need to keep moving. But, and this is a big but, it plays a vital role against enemies at or above your level. Getting the jump on enemies is, I don't want to say required, but extremely, heavily, unbelievably vital to your success in combat. Not only do you get your full turn, but you also bring enemies down to half if you get an ambush. On the other hand, getting ambushed can easily get your entire party wiped before you even have a single action. It's incredibly punishing. It's not like you're forced to engage in this mechanic. You're more than welcome to just initiate a normal battle without having to worry about the real-time combat, but you are severely handicapping yourself. I really enjoyed this edition. Enemies have a short sparkle effect right before they attack, and that allows you to time your rolls easily. Rolling has a pretty generous iframe window, but it's not like you really need to have super engaging melee combat in a turn-based JRPG. I can't stress how much of an impact having the advantage is going into a fight. It can literally make or break even just normal encounters in a dungeon. This compounds with the press turn system found in other Megaten games. Each party member has a turn represented by the icon at the top. Striking a weakness or landing crits will change the icon to a half icon, and you gain an extra turn. There are tons of niche situations or skills that can slightly alter the gameplay loop, but that's the general idea. I personally loved experimenting around and abusing this system. Like I said, you can stack ambushing with this and get up to 8 turns in addition to halved enemy health. That's all before the enemy even has a chance to move, by the way. So combat becomes very snowbally, for your benefit and for the benefit of the enemies. You have moments where you just get unlucky. I call it getting persona'd. It happens, it's an unfortunate side effect of the system, but I tend to just laugh it off and keep pushing. You're given so many tools, especially with the addition of physical skills which now have elemental affinities, that you can almost always find a way to beat a fight with your current setup. Physical skills also have a mix of costing MP or HP, depending on the archetype. There are tons of unique skills that have interesting secondary effects, so while some aspects of Metaphor are very similar to that of Persona, it also draws tons of inspiration from the Megaten series. It feels like a nice natural blend of the two styles. The synthesis skills are incredibly strong and make for good options to finish off enemies. The retry fight button is an insane life and time saver. Your allies can now both utilize their HP and MP as resources due to skill inheritance from archetypes. There's tons of strategies that allow you to both utilize front and back rows. Certain skills move party members to a different line, and some can only be used from a certain position. The Persona Master archetype is basically a Swiss Army knife of a class, on top of you getting basically limitless customization options to begin with. It, along with the Summoner line, are great ways to look for materials and fusion items in order to power up your characters. I could go on and on and on about all of the little intricate details of the combat system. I could spend ages analyzing every little minute detail about how this game manages to use both Persona and SMT as a baseline and essentially let you run wild with a full party of completely blank slates. Every option can be viable, and no two people will build their characters the same way. There are, of course, archetypes that are more suited to one character over another. Characters will typically do well with the archetype that they come with, but because of stat changes from one archetype to the next, you're able to reclass to your heart's content. Naturally, Once you unlock the royal archetypes, you're most likely going to want to focus on those requirements. They are endgame classes for a reason. While I love shooting for those, I found the requirements to be odd for some of them. Heismaze was a particular pain to unlock because he needs like 5 different completely unrelated archetype lines to level up before he can even start to level up his royal archetype. Others, however, like Troll and Juno, were pretty easy. But what about the actual encounters themselves? Well, for the most part, you tend to worry more about regular enemies than bosses, at least for me. I really started to notice this during the Dragon Temple. For one, the dungeons are labyrinths in every sense of the word. I mean, when Metaphor wants you to go through a dungeon, they're not going to be a walk in the park. You are going to have to work for it, and that was overwhelmingly apparent in this dungeon. The place is filled to the brim with high-level humans. One wrong step, one failed ambush, and you're done. I ran past so many normal enemies, died during so many random encounters. I was terrified of what the boss was going to be. And then it was a pretty easy fight, in all honesty. That was the main problem that I noticed. The difficulty curve just seems kind of off in most cases. None of the story bosses were really that hard, and few of them really challenged how I went about them. In fact, many of the hardest fights were random optional ones. Some of the random candidate fights, especially in the final arc, were really weirdly difficult. They tend to hone in on one or a few status conditions, and the entire fight revolves around that mechanic. There were a few story bosses that really stood out to me. The Rilla fight was confusing to me more than anything. She basically has everything that's annoying in this series: statuses, debuffs. You also get 2 status conditions at once. I didn't even know that was a thing until I got to this fight. She also has this weird Makarakarn-ish kind of reflect skill. Once I got here, I thought to myself, oh, I can finally use this Makara break synthesis that I've had forever. I went to cast it, and no, I guess it just doesn't work on this fight. Why? What's the point of having that skill to begin with if I can't even use it in a boss fight? Normal enemies don't use Makarakarn, and it's not like it'll ever be a problem if they set it up in the first place. It also is a synthesis, so it takes 2 turn icons to cast, so why? Why can't I use it here? It was more frustrating of a fight than anything. It did kind of put a damper on that awesome Opera House section that I talked about earlier. Unfortunately, it doesn't hold a candle to the final Louise fight. Let me preface this by saying that I did every single side quest before heading off to face him. All of my followers are maxed, and while I didn't have maxed out royal archetypes, I had many party members running those classes. I had some trouble with a few of the dragons, but I didn't have to go grind or anything to beat them. I just had to play around with my builds and skills, and I was able to eventually defeat them with some experimentation. The first phase was a cakewalk. I struggled a little bit against the first part of the Destroyer Caradrius, and then I got to the third and final phase. Fuck this fight. It is so bullshit. Like I said, it took a couple tries to beat the second phase, but nothing outrageous. There was never really a moment where I got completely walled out in the entire game leading up to this. Not even in the final area. But this last fight is such a massive difficulty spike for no real apparent reason either. There was absolutely no indication that this was going to be a problem. It never felt that the game was slowly ramping up to this fight. And it just feels so RNG dependent. Sometimes you just get screwed and now you have to go back and fight the second phase again. Sometimes he randomly wipes out one of your turn icons. Did one of your party members die? Too bad, now you only have 2 turn icons. Oh, and he gets 8 turn icons every single turn! And that's before he takes advantage of any of the press turn mechanics. And apparently, if you didn't break the statues leading up to fight, he gets 12 turn icons! There are so many random difficulty spikes and valleys that it can sometimes feel like these weird fights come out of nowhere, and that's frustrating. But infinitely more in the very last fight of the game. So much so that it took me a few days to cool off before thinking about writing notes for this final part of the script. It takes what should be an absolutely amazing ending to an incredible game and turns it into a frustrating slog. I played on hard for the entire game. Again, I had some minor roadblocks here and there, but nothing that my current abilities couldn't handle. For this fight, I had to turn it all the way down to easy, and it still took a few tries to even just survive it. I don't have a problem with the game walling you at points, but to do it at this point, when you are literally one fight away from finishing off an incredible journey, is really frustrating. But other than that weird difficulty spike in the final phase of the final boss, I really enjoyed the combat side of things in Metaphor. The dungeons in particular are a lot of fun. I say dungeons, and while most of them are traditional dungeons in a sense, Metaphor really mixes up the gameplay. A lot of the areas have a kind of Skyward Sword hallway-esque design. You can come to your own conclusions about the validity of this style versus open world, but I think there are merits to each system. The enemy encounters can be more deliberate this way, and there is more of a sense of progression throughout many of the smaller sections. Many of the side quests have their own dedicated dungeons. They aren't much to write home about. They don't have any unique mechanics, and the aesthetics are pretty generic, but I appreciate Atlus going out of their way to include these and spice things up that would normally just being a boring fetch quest. You also have some stealth sections in Kriganti Castle. It's fun hiding from the baby human before you even know what it looks like, but my favorite quote-unquote dungeon is Skyrunner Caradrius. It's not really a dungeon, but you are given the task of stealthily making your way through his gauntlet runner and fighting a handful of mini-bosses. I don't want to say that this dungeon comes out of nowhere because the characters mention how you're going to have to sneak your way through, but it definitely caught me off guard when I was playing through it. I thought it would be more like the Opera House, but no. This part is almost entirely stealth-focused, and it's a great change of pace. You're also put on a timer to beat the mini-bosses, which further adds to the diversity of gameplay that this game has to offer. It's more about quick, decisive combat victories versus a meticulous war of attrition. There were some funny moments, particularly when I went to fight the optional bosses at the end of the game. These fights are a ton of fun and push you to reformulate your playstyle, but in a fair way in my opinion. Like, the Devourer of Stars reflects everything, so you either have to use almighty attacks or break skills. I thought to myself, there's no way it actually reflects everything, so I slowly but surely tested out each affinity up until, yeah, I'm gonna have to take some time to think about this one. The Devourer of Flame starts off as a normal-ish fight until it unleashes a behemoth full party charm and an attack that deals 9,999 damage. I just put up a Makara Karn and killed it with the classic Uno reverse card. And then I got to the Elegy of the Soul. At first, I thought that you had to live through the 9999 damage attack it throws out on the first turn, and then you could proceed to fight normally. I looked through my archetypes and skills in Academia and came up with a strategy. And then it threw out the exact same attack again. Yeah, apparently I had Hulkenberg equipped with a piece of gear that reflected something. I looked at the rules online and immediately facepalmed. But after that, it was smooth sailing after a handful of attempts. These are the fights that I really enjoy in the series. Ones that challenge your strategic thinking and ability to reconfigure your party's gears and skills in order to overcome specific roadblocks. Metaphor is also not a stranger to pulling a territorial Rotbart. Throwing a level 46 enemy in the area right outside Grand Trad was a surprise that I was not even remotely prepared to deal with, but definitely made for a memorable experience. I love how the followers play off the archetypes to make combat easier, like how Heisme and Katharina's follower skills stack and you can straight up murder enemies who are higher level than you without even having to attack. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't tried to fish for this golden combination during some of the harder random encounters, but it's too fun not to. Speaking of the followers, let's get into one of my favorite parts of the Persona series, the characters. I obviously can't talk about all of them here, we'd be here for like 5 hours, so I'll go over some of my favorites and least favorites. Starting with the very first character we meet, Gallica. I love this girl so much. She's so cute and has so much sass. She's by far my favorite companion character out of the recent games. I think it's because she does feel way more like an organic character rather than someone there just to give exposition. She grows along with you, and through learning that Will is kind of a person, kind of not a person, decides that it doesn't matter what she was assigned to, she will decide her role in this world herself. She even plays a minor role in combat with that tiny little armor set. She'll occasionally give you openings for various boss fights. It's minor, but it's still nice to see. One of my personal favorites, and judging by the Japanese popularity poll, many people's favorite, is Stroll. He does initially feel like a bit of a stereotypical, well-intentioned noble. He cares deeply for his people and is troubled that he can't support them how he wants. He even tries to sacrifice himself to let you escape during that first human boss fight. However, this gives way to a more intriguing part of his character growth: his feelings of inadequacy. He believes that he can't live up to the legacy of his parents. He feels like he was and still is an unworthy son of his parents' trust and love. It's tragic to see him come to these conclusions after his parents' death. I think we all eventually feel that, especially after our parents are gone. Most people at least get to mature before they see their parents leave, but Stroll was never given that opportunity. He was only a young boy when his village was destroyed, and he had to grow up fast. That tragedy shaped him into the man he is and becomes throughout the course of the game. I mean, he even says that he's undeserving of the title Beloved Son. But through your combined efforts, he claws his way out of his imposter syndrome and finds a home for his people. One in which his people can live under his protection. One in which he has earned his title as noble. One in which he can earn his parents' love. Or at least, now he can finally feel like he has made them proud. Even in the 8 ranks that we have with Stroll, I still loved him. He's really a truly fantastic character, and his story is one of the best followers in the game. However, my absolute favorite in Metaphor is Alonso. I know he's overly dramatic, but that's just the kind of guy that I am. I mean, he tried to kill himself in the rank 4 scene. How can you not get invested in this follower? I was losing it during this rank, and this comes after the rank 3 scene when we see him rush home to his burning village and hold his dying mother in his hands. Seriously, this follower goes from 0 to 100 so quickly. Every time I had the opportunity to talk to Alonso, I immediately jumped at the opportunity because I was so invested in what was going to happen next. I think I was more invested in the actual story than his character growth. I mean, he doesn't really change all that much throughout it. He's not stagnant, but I feel like he doesn't have near as much character growth as some of the others. But it felt like watching your favorite TV show and it leaves on a cliffhanger, and then you sit there, waiting for a whole week before you get to see what happens next. And throughout these earlier ranks, he just radiates with emotions in his portrait. I'm convinced that they chose to make Alonso a Nidio because his eyes play such a huge part in conveying these desperate emotions. I was also not prepared for his execution in rank 8, and this probably is going to sound a little odd. I'm glad that they cut to black when he dies. It left me feeling like, oh, okay, well, we'll see him again when it cuts to the next scene. And then it never does. There's no music, it's silent, and it just goes on to the next day. It's not until you accept and complete a side quest that you finally get to see the trickster in his full glory. And the game never explains how he did it. Again, like any good trickster. While he can't go back to his village and live out the life he wanted, he lives to support you and your quest for the throne, showing that even though it's not a traditionally happy ending, it's far from a bad one. I would generally say that there are no bad followers. That's one thing Metaphor does pretty well. It's very consistent. Even though there are some incredibly high highs with the likes of Stroll and Alonso, there are never really any low lows. And I commend Atlus for being able to write this many different characters who I look forward to interacting with on a regular basis. Moore is probably the weakest. The bulk of his follower is just a reward for leveling up your archetypes, and most of his development gets drip-fed to you through the main story and a little bit through his follower. Unfortunately, the most interesting part of his character takes place during the confrontation with him during the final Louise fight. He and Gallica are essentially story-related followers. I can't get too mad about them being underutilized because it's something that Atlus seems pretty dead set on keeping, but I really wish we got to have a proper follower for Gallica. Like I said, she's one of my favorites, and I was sad that she was not given the usual treatment. I do think it's a bit weird that Fabian and Batlin didn't also get followers. They're pretty consistent and relevant throughout the story for minor characters. They also get their own portraits, and basically everything they say is voice acted, so I was really expecting at least the cat mommy to get something. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't dedicate an entire section of this video to none other the main antagonist of the game, Louise. This character is incredible. He's so menacing, and god damn, I'm so glad we finally get an RPG that has a consistent villain throughout the whole game. I know we've all seen memes of RPGs like, first quest, deliver a sandwich. 100th quest, kill God. And yeah, okay, he kind of does go God-ish towards the end, but it's still the same character. I think what makes him stand out to me so much is that he kind of progressively becomes more menacing and threatening as you go through the game. Yeah, everyone says that he put a curse on the prince, but we, the players, never see that. Yeah, he killed Grius, but Grius was also the one who tried to assassinate him in the first place. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be too gung-ho about letting my potential murderer walk free. And he really stands for something that we can all agree on: allowing people to succeed regardless of their birth. He's got a massive base of followers. Sure, we see some of the more rabid ones like Gladel and Zorba, but Basilio and Fidelio, while not entirely hospitable to you, seem like decent enough people. His change in character isn't really even character development, but rather, we slowly peel back the layers of his inner psyche. It starts with him revealing to Stroll that he destroyed his homeland, then he tells you his plans with Dracodios, until finally we peel back his final mask in the very final fight of the game. And there's legitimate reasons for his actions. He wants a world in which only the strong survive because that's exactly the kind of world where he had to grow up. He didn't have the choice to be weak, and his ruthless pursuit is precisely how he rose through the ranks so quickly. I'm not saying that he's some kind of tragic villain or that he's sympathetic, but there's a logical progression to his ideals. That is why he's so intriguing to me. He's still a villain, don't get me wrong, but he's so well crafted that we understand how he ended up the way he did. More importantly, he's just so menacing in every scene he's in. He shows up so regularly that I was always slightly on edge every time we hit the next story beat. He's simultaneously so controlled and poised, but also unpredictable. Like, I don't know what he's gonna do next, but he does. It's that calculating ferocity which makes him feel like an immediate threat. That greatly comes down to Joseph Tweedle's performance. I actually looked him up when writing this script, and he hasn't really done a ton of work, but this is a phenomenal performance. I could gush about Louise so much more, but I'm gonna make a standalone video about him so that I don't take too long gushing about him here. I think Metaphor did give Atlus a chance to develop some more outlandish characters. Persona being relegated to real life does inherently restrict them to real world problems, but Metaphor takes advantage of this newfound setting. Someone like Neurus in his quest to discover the ancient artifacts, or his tinkering on the Gauntlet Runner, is something that would be difficult to pull off in a modern setting. He's the perfect combination of a mad scientist who's more eccentric than evil, and just happens to be on your side. He reminds me a lot of Robbie from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, so he fits in perfectly in the new fantasy setting. You've also got Brigida setting off to torch an entire village because someone stole her dog, which, okay, yeah, you know, I understand that one. Barden is a fantastic addition because he's one of the few characters who we actually see regress throughout the course of his follower. He's very much like the Moon social links in that sense, so instead of us helping him work through his problems, his baggage that he's already arrived with, we witness firsthand the root of these issues. We see that even though he had the best intentions for Martyra, he goes about it in the worst way possible. The inclusion of the Sandworn fight is also a great way to show off a little bit of his archetypal role in combat. Juno went in a direction I don't think anybody expected. For one, We get baby Judah, she's so cute! But I also wasn't ready for her to just come out and say that she was a slave, and that her entire tribe hides who they really are so that others will take them seriously. Katharina's whole shtick is essentially a commentary on the social caste system and capitalism. Basilio is fantastic and has awesome chemistry with his brother even before you get him as a party member. Yufa is adorable when she's clearly in love with you but can't express it. I could go on and on and on about how awesome these characters are. The only one I wasn't really into was Hulkenberg, not necessarily in the story or in the context of the group dynamic, but I didn't really like her follower. It's kind of predictable, like, yeah, here's this old comrade who used to be my buddy, and now we have to stop him because he's corrupt. Oh yeah, knighthood and honor. It just feels like in a sea of interesting and creative characters who all seem to have unique and engaging problems, Hulkenberg seemed to be the most generic. Which is a shame because you'd think hers would have more to do with her failures as a knight, and maybe we'd even get a glimpse into her travels after the incident. Unfortunately, hers slips through the cracks, and to me, it's fair to say that hers is by far the weakest of all the normal followers. Even Heisme, who you could argue has a similarly generic foundation, a father moving on from his son's death, uses the setting of metaphor as a good backdrop to explore the topic. It even ropes in Basilio with the Parapus riot that killed his son. While he is racist at the beginning of the game, he slowly works through that and accepts that the trauma of losing his son does not define an entire tribe. One of the best changes that they made to the follower system is that there are no points from your answer. I can now answer more authentically and offend whoever I want, or pick the funny options without worrying about not being able to level someone up. Now on to the part of the review that I always get really excited to talk about. The presentation. Atlus is the king of style, charisma, and charm when it comes to this. They are industry leading in some of the most mundane parts of video games. Let's start with the menus, shall we? They look amazing. I mean, did we really expect anything less from them? There's a few themes going on, and we can really break them down into two different categories. First is the ink splat effects that you see most often when you're highlighting an option. The second are the models that are heavily based off Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. Similar to past Atlus titles, they use these two ideas as the foundation for the entire aesthetic of every single menu. This is honestly the part of Persona games that I get most excited for, which is weird to say out loud now that I'm thinking about it. Atlus gives me this grand adventure with amazing story, incredible characters, all this stuff, and my big monkey brain goes ooga booga me like menu. But they take these two ideas and just run with them. They're related to, right? Da Vinci did some painting in his spare time, maybe one or two notable works, but these two are ever present in basically every menu. There are what look to be hand-drawn lines throughout the dialogue boxes, ever shifting, almost like a genius is writing and then rewriting his ideas down in a notebook over and over again, never completely satisfied with what they've done. The battle UI is just so good. It was a little hard to read at first, but once you get used to where everything is, it becomes second nature. The ink splat on the archetype button just gives that one little splash of color needed to take the character of the UI over the edge. Up top, you have the turn counter. The rotating crystals are beautiful and for no real reason other than just have something cool to look at. One thing I noticed when looking back at old footage was that the king's face that's normally in the center of the turn counter isn't actually there in the first few hours of the game. It doesn't show up until after the race for the throne is announced. It's a small detail, but a nice continuity check. The character portraits are gorgeous. In fact, all of the official art for this game is just so beautiful. Seriously, if you ever get the chance, go look at the official art for this game. I can't even describe why I like some of the character designs so much. They do feel more hand-painted than something like Persona, and it adds to the previously mentioned themes that I've talked about. And all of them have this weird combination of fantasy and like retro 60s and 70s fashion to them. It's such a bizarre combination that somehow works so well. I think the obvious example is Juna. First of all, look at this official art. It's so dynamic. Her pose, the massive fan, her obscene amount of hair, it's incredible. And her dress, the long socks, the headband, it's straight out of the 60s. Bastilio is another great design. The flared pants, the belt, the neckerchief, yeah, that's what it's called. I had to look it up. It just screams retro. And yet, somehow, none of these characters feel out of place in a fantasy game. They manage to exist alongside someone like Louise, a character whose design is pretty standard fantasy nobility. If there's one design I'm not really a fan of, it's Katharina. Her outfit feels way too busy, the colors don't really match, and there's too many different materials. Plus, the red really clashes with the other colors. Look, I like her as a character, but her design really could have used a little more tweaking. There's also just so many little things that add to the presentation. The narration during the traveling sections make it feel very storybook-esque. Gallica having cute little armor that's probably completely useless, the royal virtues forming a crown, the pipes in the gauntlet runner moving when Nira speaks through them, the various stunningly gorgeous locales that you stop at along your journey, your Steam name, at least on PC, showing up in Morris Scroll, the calendar shifting to you and Gallica once you fuse back with the prince, Gallica asking herself, why am I falling? When you get tossed in the dungeon of Kirganti Castle in straight up Looney Tunes fashion. It's all of these little things that make me fall in love with Atlus games. You can rag on Atlus all you want. Like any company, they can sometimes make questionable decisions. However, you can't criticize how much effort and love and care they put into making their games. They truly care about all of the little things. And it's reasons like that which make me more than happy to pay $70 for their games. Part of that comes down to Metaphor being a celebration of Atlus. I don't think I've ever played another game that self-references so many past titles at once. Let's just speedrun this list, shall we? Etria, Persona Master, Trickster, Devil Summoner, Drakengray Shinjuku, Soul Hacker, Masks, Demons, The Relics in the Opera House, Katharina, and probably about 1,000 others that I can't remember or don't know because I haven't played every Atlus game under the sun. These things don't take away from the base experience. They aren't even that relevant to the plot, but for those who have stuck with the company, it's rewarding to pick out all of these references and go, it's the best kind of fan service. One that doesn't detract from the product, but are subtle and not so subtle nods to longtime players. It's also been interesting to see Shoji Meguro flex his compositional skills in a more traditional RPG. He's mostly stuck with the Persona games in the past, so this was a fantastic showing for a completely different style than what we've all been accustomed to from him. I think I can speak for everyone when I say that I did not have a rapping Buddhist monk on my bingo card for this game, and much like the incredible character designs, it just works. Warriors in Valor is superb, so amazingly incredible, and it's just the normal battle theme. You whack a level 2 enemy and this shit plays. There's so many amazing tracks in this game. Warriors in Valor, You Face Louise Guillaburn, King of Destruction, Verge of Life and Death, Virga Island, Face of the Palace, Ode to Heroes, Prelude to a Heroic Tale, Wings of Freedom, Journey's Legs, and all of them are a result of Gallica's magic. It's such a simple and creative way to, I guess, canonize the fact that there's music playing in your head throughout the game. It's so good. It's so good. The only gripes that I have with the audio design in this game is that sometimes the voice acting is a little too soft in the cutscenes, and that the Martyra theme sounds like cheap MIDI instruments. But seriously, other than that, all of the musicians, composers, voice actors, sound designers, everybody absolutely nailed this game. I was pretty bummed to see that the followers weren't voice acted. That's one change that Reload made, and it had such a profound impact on the social links in that game. It's disappointing to see that feature not make it into this game. I imagine it's because Metaphor was in production far longer than Reload, so I really hope Atlus continues that trend going forward. I know I've been comparing this game to other past Persona titles. I know it's technically not a Persona game, but it shares so many distinguishing characteristics with it that it's hard to divorce the identity of this game from the Persona series. And I think that it feels like something that Atlus wanted to try out with Persona and couldn't really find a way to make it work within the realistic setting of those games. I know that P5 was planned to have you travel around multiple different large areas. They unfortunately couldn't make it work, but with many gameplay changes, like the Gauntlet Runner and being able to warp between areas that are far apart, they were able to achieve that with Metaphor. It feels like a culmination of Atlus. Whether it's the games, the gameplay, different developmental ideas, it's a further refinement of some of their best works. There are so many quality of life changes to the core formula. You can skip through attack animations, leveling up your supporters straight up gives you new archetypes, requests now give you money, EXP, and increase your virtues. Any extra virtues earned now turn into extra mag for you to use. Weather makes dungeons way harder to give you an extra challenge, and even incentivize you to tackle tougher challenges. It's clear that I've taken my sweet ass time with this review. Most of the time I do that anyway. I mean, you can take a look at the games I've covered and only a handful of them are newer releases. I picked up Metaphor when it released. Obviously, I've spent time playing other games along the way, but when a review takes me, like 8 months to finally polish off, you know it's going to be a big one. And it feels like an important one for me as well. This was the first completely new game that I've played from them after falling in love with the Persona series. Because of that, I really wanted to savor it. I wanted to become engrossed in its world and characters. I wanted to tinker and experiment with all of the different archetypes. I wanted to enjoy a stroll through Grand Trad and talk to the most mundane NPCs, because it's rare that we get a chance to do so. Every now and then, you find a series that just clicks with you. That's how I am with Atlus's premier franchise. I know I'm not the most knowledgeable person about Atlus. I've jumped on the bandwagon only within the past few years, but I feel like this game deserves my utmost attention. The characters are awesome, the world is incredible, the music is amazing, the menus are gorgeous, even if the game stumbles a bit towards the end. And even if there are issues with the pacing and the excessive breadth of its themes. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with Metaphor. It's a fresh take on a tried and true formula. Even after spending this long talking about it, I don't really know how to end this video, but I guess there's no better way than to end it how the game ends itself. Fantasy lives on. It lives on through the amazing work from Atlus, the culmination of all their efforts, and it lives on through us, the players. Thanks for watching.
Without a doubt, you will face all sorts of trials ahead. But carry onward with all your heart. Onward, fearless, into a world unknown.